One of the exchanges about Zazen that Zen practitioners are most familiar with is one involving Master Yakusan. So it occurs, for instance, at the start of the Zazen Shin chapter of the Shobogenzo. So in Tanahashi's translation, the exchange reads as follows. Yakusan was sitting Zazen. A monk asked him, "In steadfast sitting, what do you think?" Yakusan said, "Think, not thinking." The monk asked, "How do you think not thinking?" Yakusan replied, "Beyond thinking." So the three material words in this exchange are thought or thinking, which is Hishiryo, not thinking, the direct negative, which is Fushiryo, and other than thinking or different from thinking, which is Hishiryo. And so Tanahashi's translating Hishiryo as beyond thinking. There's a very similar passage in the Fukan Zengi when we chant it. This passage has always been quite problematic for practitioners. So often there's a tendency to think that Hishiryo is some special state that we need to attain. And there's questions about, as the monk said, how do you think not thinking? So those are obviously issues. But for myself, what's puzzling is the monk's initial question, because it seems really dumb for a monk. So the monk has presumably been Yakusan's student for some time. He's received tuition about Zazen. He's not a layman. So what's he doing when he sees Yakusan sitting, saying, when you're doing Zazen, what do you think? The problems that we have as Western Buddhists are twofold. Firstly, what's being said in texts like these, and in Indian texts, is actually quite elusive sometimes to grasp. It's not immediately obvious, and it's made worse by being separated quite a long way in time and culture. But the second is that we're having to rely on translations, and sometimes these translations are not reliable or are not unequivocal. So it's not that the Chinese yields one English translation only. Classical Chinese is notoriously capable of multiple interpretations, and that's exacerbated by the Chinese fondness for terseness. So you get these very short statements which are capable of a number of different meanings, and that creates problems for us. The Estonian scholar Ryan Rode has written very interestingly, I think, about Dogen, and he's written a paper this year in 2021 where he retranslates this exchange. And the query that I had about the monk's dumb initial question seems to be answered by him in his translation. So he re-renders the monk's initial question as Yakusan was sitting, and a monk asked, "What is a motionless thought?" So, in other words, the ideogram for stillness isn't referring to the zazen, because it's obvious that Yakusan is in zazen. It relates to the thought. So the question is an understandable question, an intelligent question. And his translation goes on. So Yakusan replies, "It is the thought that occurs during not thinking." In other words, a motionless thought is the thought that occurs during not thinking. The monk asks a supplementary question, "What kind of thoughts do you have during not thinking?" And Yakusan says, "Non-thoughts." So I find that a really much more helpful translation and much more understandable. And Reinrod points out that there's an issue with the habitual translation of Hishiryo as a verb, i.e. non-thinking, beyond thinking, because he points out that the her is appended to nouns, not verbs. So it's non-thoughts, not non-thinking, and that seems to be the case in the original Chinese and is repeated in the Japanese, but somehow when it's rendered into English, the Hishiryo becomes activated, so it's always taken to mean thinking rather than thoughts. So if we take Reinrod's translation